Former President Trump said Thursday revenge can be justified, the latest instance of the presumptive GOP nominee leaving the door open to going after his opponents, even as he argued the country is worse off after his criminal trial in New York. Trump sat for an interview with Phil McGraw, host of the TV show Dr. Phil, who suggested to the former president he didn't have time to get even with his critics. Well, revenge does take time, I will say that, and sometimes revenge can be justified, Phil. I have to be honest, sometimes it can, Trump responded. I think the country is really worse for what they've done. And I think you see that when you look at the poll numbers, Trump continued, when you see that almost 400 million has poured in since this horrible decision was made. That was a few days ago. Numbers that nobody ever heard of in politics before. It's a great honor. The people of our country get it. Trump was found guilty last week by a jury on 34 counts of falsifying documents, falsifying business records to conceal alleged affairs during his 2016 campaign. It makes him the first former U.S. president to be convicted of a felony. The former president has rallied against his legal woes, calling it an election interference and claiming it is being orchestrated by the Biden White House. There is no evidence between Biden or his aides. There is no evidence President Biden or his aides have had any involvement in Trump's legal cases. In the days since the verdict, Trump has repeatedly suggested it would be fair game and he would be justified in targeting his opponents if he is reelected in November. Trump told Fox News' Sean Hannity on Wednesday he would have every right to go after them after his own prosecution. The former president told Newsmax on Tuesday it was very possible Democrats could face prosecution down the road. This is interesting, I guess. I can't believe I forgot Dr. Phil's actual last name, McGraw. I guess I'm just so used to people calling him Dr. Phil that it escaped me. It's kind of synonymous with him, that name. So I like that the article points out there's no evidence that Biden or his aides are involved with Trump's legal cases. And you have to understand that we live in the era of perpetual lies by prominent politicians. Oh, the election was stolen, no evidence. Oh, the current president is trying to get the former president through the courts, no evidence. Really, Biden has remained pretty neutral throughout this whole thing. I know he made a comment when Trump's mugshot came out where he was joking about him being handsome or whatever, but it's really interesting just how little he's had to say about the case itself. But isn't it ironic that the same person who, if you buy his narrative, oh, they're coming after me, they're using these courts to stop me because they know I'm going to win. You don't think there's something hypocritical, and of course we know that Trump is a hypocrite, about saying the courts are being used to go after you politically, right? This is all politically motivated, but then also saying that revenge can be justified. Which I mean, I do agree with the sentiment that a person may not do something unless provoked by another person or set of people. So you could infer that if Trump's legal cases were not going on and it was just, from when did he announce? November 2022 all the way up until November of this year. He just ran for 2 years and got creamed or either one or whatever. You could probably infer he likely would not try to go after his opponents for supposed election interference, but because he's being gone after for his various criminal cases throughout 4 different states, he's like, okay, well, if I get in there, it's time to get revenge. Sometimes it's justified. It's a really it's one of those things that I talked before about how we've already had Trump as president. A lot of these warnings that people gave about him did not actually come to the matter. I mean, I remember back in 2016 they were warning that if he were elected, he would go after Hillary and all his other, but that didn't happen. But when you hear stuff like this, you start to wonder: is this another sign that things will be worse a second time around with him than they were the first time? Because a lot of his comments have been unhinged. A lot of, like him refusing to admit after multiple years and multiple court cases that have shown no proof that the 2020 election was not stolen is just more evidence of this like complete delusional state that he and a lot of his backers are in. And like ooh, we made 400 million in donations, which I'd like to actually see an official. I know that his website did crash after the verdict, but I've said before, I don't really believe in a lot of these big donations that they claim being from regular people. We've talked about how he had his GoFundMe and people were barely even donating to that. And I think that I believe that has more to do with the fact that people are just not well off enough to give him hundreds of millions of dollars unless they're coming from the same like 10 or 15 big donors. So even with that number he's claiming there, I'd like to see some actual evidence that's what he received after the verdict came out. But no, this interview is really just another taste of what we can expect and come to worry about if he's able to dupe enough people into supporting him a second time in the White for a second time in a successful run for the White House, which hopefully they don't. It's just a crazy election cycle. It really is.